Hello everyone, this is Scotty and I'll be doing my best to explain what is going on in this speedrun of Prince of Persia Warrior Within, which I recently did, and it's at the moment supposedly the second fastest speedrun of the game, but that's really only because at the end of the game it has a ton of randomness and most people's runs die to that, and I just happened to get lucky. The early game is fairly basic, so I'm not going to comment too much on that. Instead, I'll just explain what's going to happen and something about the video. But what you might notice immediately is that the audio may seem a bit glitchy, and that's because while recording this I had the game music turned off, and Ubisoft did a bit of a shoddy job at mixing the game audio. And as a result, a lot of the dialogue and sound effects are, for whatever reason, also muted when you mute the music. But it's not too big of a deal. Most of the sound effects are still there. Another thing is that I have removed the entire video folder from the game folder, meaning that there are no pre-rendered cutscenes at any point. This includes load screens and game over cutscenes, as well as the longer ones, like right at the beginning of the game there was supposed to be a lengthy cutscene that takes probably like 2 or 3 minutes. This is something that was only recently introduced to speedruns of this game, and we'll see how it sticks. Personally I like it because it makes things go fast. And here's the first boss fight, where a lot of runs come to die. It's a common theme in the both part of the run. It's, I would say it's by far the least fun section of the run. So even though the boat I had in this particular attempt was not great, I decided to go with it because I just don't want to reset all the time. And right after the boat there's also normally supposed to be a long cutscene, as well as a load screen, but those won't be there in this run. Instead we immediately show up on the beach. And it'll take still about maybe 4 or 5 minutes for the game to really begin, which is a good thing. I'll get a chance to explain why this game is so short. And the big reason to that is that unlike Sands of Time and Two Thrones, this has semi-open world, meaning that you do revisit a lot of the areas throughout the game. I think most of the areas are visited twice, and the game has to somehow keep track of where you are in the story, because the plot is still linear, even though the world is open. And we don't exactly know how the game does that. We believe it has something to do with items on the maps called story gates and managers, and anything similar to those. We've been unable to explain how they work, but they seem pretty important. That's all I can say for a fact. And by abusing the open world design and the way the game keeps track of the plot, we are able to skip a fairly good chunk of it. I'd say maybe 70-80% of the game, just by abusing these design choices. And another thing that really breaks this game are zips, which is something that's present in all 3 of the games: Sands of Time, Warrior Within, Two Thrones. And it's another thing which I can't explain for sure how it works, but the theory is that the game doesn't rewind accurately. It doesn't exactly. It's not like you would immediately assume. Instead it checks what actions you did before you did the rewind, and tries to assume where you would end up if those were played backwards. And it's not as precise as it probably should be. For the most part, it's good enough, but when you do enough actions, say 15 to 20, I don't remember the exact number, the game can no longer approximate where you would end up in, and instead the actions that happened before those 15 to 20 actions get massively boosted. So for instance, if you do a roll, then you take 20 small steps, which I do using the mouse wheel. The principle in the rewind, first go back those 20 steps, and then the roll is going to be massively boosted, and instead of going the normal distance of a roll, it goes maybe 50 times the distance of the roll, and it also ignores all collision and triggers except for low triggers, which is super convenient for us. Overall, it turns out that everything about this game is really conveniently designed for speedrunning. All the pieces fall just where they need to fall, and how should I put it? There are many parts in the game where if the game had been designed just slightly differently, the entire run would fall apart. But it all works out just beautifully in the end. Either way, more about the zips. Well, is there anything else I need to add about the zips? You will see the first one soon, as soon as I get the rewind power up, which is right after the portal. And I will be doing 2 rolls and a block roll. The 2 rolls give me a lot of distance each, and the block roll gives me just a bit on top of that distance. And I will be hitting a total of 3 loading triggers, so you'll see the area I'm starting to deload, and then I'll just appear in a completely different place, skipping a long hallway and a large room. First I align it with the wall here by doing a short wall run, then do the block roll and 2 rolls into the wall, and take the required steps using the mouse wheel. It may look like normal walking, but I'm actually doing a ton of small steps. And there you go. And the second zip right here, through this wall, is going to put me into a completely different area of the game. And that's where the open world design kicks in. Because it's supposed to be impossible for you to get here, but conveniently enough there is a checkpoint or a fountain that you can use and jump off a cliff and get a game over. And as you use the fountain, you set your checkpoint there, and when you jump off the cliff, you force the game into loading the correct area. So now I'm way further in the game than I'm ever supposed to be. The plotline still thinks I'm early in the game, but area-wise I'm really far. There's some nice drop dodging. And up next I'm going to progress the plotline. This is something that we cannot explain properly why it works, but the foundry is a special place. First I'm gonna zip into the foundry and then do a vertical zip upwards, which is supposed to kill me with fall damage, but there you have it, the biggest mistake in the run. I didn't rewind for long enough, so I survived the fall damage. And I spent a couple of seconds thinking about life and whether I should reset or not, but luckily I chose not to. Alright, so now we have a checkpoint here, and we have died in the foundry once. And now something has changed in the plotline. So we do a zip past the foundry. Also, a thing to note about the vertical zips is that depending on when you release the zip, you can die to fall damage, but if you release it fast enough after the jump, you'll survive and you'll just gain a lot of height, like I just did there. And this is where the game falls apart. Because right now the game is fairly confused as to where in the story am I. So when I jump off the cliff, it first turns me into a floating head, and then into the sand wraith. This is something that happened apparently a lot when the game came out, and people just got stuck when the game soft-locked, as it turned them into sand wraith randomly at one point of the game. Ironically, it's the only point in the game which we've been unable to replicate. And more zips. But now we are the sand wraith, and the plot has progressed. It's also possible to do this without actually turning into sand wraith, but that's not really convenient. Because the uses of sand wraith are that while you lose health all the time, you also regain sand, which allows you to zip more. So this room is again really convenient for speedrunning, because you're not supposed to be able to get down here from the room above without zips. And the scorpion sword just happens to be loaded. None of the rooms around this section are loaded, but the scorpion sword is, which is great for us because it is, other than the water sword, the most powerful main weapon in the game. And the funny thing about that is that we actually never use it to attack an enemy. We only get the scorpion sword because the damage of your sidearm is calculated based on the power of your main weapon. So later on we'll be getting a light sword, which is what's going to be used to kill the final boss. But if we didn't get the scorpion sword before getting the light sword would still do awful damage, because it would be calculated based on the starting weapon, the spider sword, which does next to nothing. I believe the exact number is that the light sword does 2.5 times the damage of your main weapon, but that's from a wiki, so don't trust it. Oh yeah, there's the Haga. There was supposed to be a chase scene in the library, but we messed with the triggers quite a bit with the zips. The cutscene is still there, but the chase never activated. At the start of the Mystic Cave there's a wall run and a jump, right here, which skips a really short cutscene. I'm really lucky to have gotten that skip, because it's a short cutscene and it's questionable if it's even worth going for the skip. If you have to line it up, it's usually not worth it, but I luckily got it really quickly. And coming up is the light sword, which we'll be zipping to, surprisingly. Another thing which I failed to mention during the library is that the library is an awkward area, because it's one of those places that you're supposed to visit both as the prince and the sand wraith, and we somehow got to manipulate it so that you load it as the sand wraith version of the library. And some reason sometimes it still loads the prince version, either for the upstairs or the downstairs section. And it can be a mixture of both. Like you get the bottom half for prince and top half for sand wraith. And it is extremely confusing as to why that happens, and we've been unable to figure it out. That's something we call the hybrid library. Similar thing can happen in a mechanical tower, which we are heading to right now. That zip may have looked fancy with the setup, but it really just follows the direct path which you're supposed to follow. It's a surprisingly difficult zip, and considering how little time it saves, but it looks fancy. Alright, and we are heading for the mechanical tower. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a minor zip through this wall, and what that zip is gonna do is it's gonna make me drop down into a loading trigger, and then I'm gonna immediately rewind back. You can see on the door on the left that the area behind me has deloaded, right there. And then I'm just gonna jump and roll and jump and do a zip to reach the next area. The jump is not because there's a height difference in the areas, but because there's a spike trap in front of me and you can't zip through moving objects like traps or breakable walls. So I gotta do a jump to get over it, and then do another jump at the end of the zip to survive. And then I do the same thing as I did in the beginning of the zip section of the game, which is suicide into a trap to make the area load. And this is something that I think I'm the only one who does this, but I do a rewind glitch to get down from here. The fall is a bit too high for the prince to survive, but if you rewind multiple times into the same spot, like this, your position changes a tiny bit, which allows me to survive the fall anyway. It costs a lot of sand and it's probably not as fast as some other ways of doing that zip, but I think it's the easiest and most consistent one. Another exciting boss fight of sorts. Completely skipped. Again, dropping down to hit a loading trigger, otherwise the staircase wouldn't be where it is right now. And that is just about the end of the sand raid section of the game. And the next room is probably the most complex room in the game, at least from a technical standpoint. And we've been trying to figure out exactly what causes things to happen in there, but we don't really have the right tools to figure it out. But many things can happen when you enter this main access hall right here. Sometimes this cutscene isn't here, which means that you have soft lock somehow, probably, or you get the cutscene and the prince removes the mask and doesn't turn back in the print. Instead, the mask is on the ground and he's still wearing it somehow. And many things can go wrong in this room. I don't think we can be surprised by this room anymore. This game always finds a way to do something new and stupid. This is how it's supposed to go. You take off the mask and turn back into the prince. Nothing too complex. I'm gonna heal up just for the upcoming trap sections, because I really don't want to, well, deal with the traps the proper ways. I'm just gonna tank through them, and because I had so little left thanks to this wraith health drain, I would have died to that without the healing. This backflip is a very minor time save. So, shows the zips really nicely. Easy to understand way. And we just happen to have enough sand for that. This zip, however, is a bit more important one, because it gets me to the throne room without having to watch any extra cutscenes. And I backtrack a bit to the front door of the throne room, as there's a low trigger there, and then do another zip to get to the quarter room behind the throne. And again, we've skipped so much stuff that the game isn't fully loaded, so I hope you notice those buttons right there. When you drink the fountain, the game realizes that, oh yeah, you're supposed to have been here already, and the buttons go a bit nuts on the wall. But yeah, this getting over is to load the next area. If I was to just walk through the time portal, the next area wouldn't be there. I'd just fall down into my death. And we're approaching the final boss, which is the main source of difficulty in this game, or this run. And a lot of runs die here because it is pretty much completely random whether you get a good cycle or not, and it can, having bad RNG can cost you up to like 2 minutes, although you gotta be really unlucky for that to happen. But something like 40 seconds to a minute and a half is completely normal, because The final boss has 3 tornado attacks, which she will try to do at certain parts of the fight, and each of those takes 40 seconds. And ideally we can skip all 3 of them, but that is quite precise. The first one is pretty simple, you just attack her until you get a cutscene. And the second one, you gotta attack her in a very precise way until you get into another cutscene where you have to mash the mouse button. And well, in a speedrun you don't do that, because losing the mashing is what allows you to skip one of the cycles. Right there. And then immediately start attacking again, and as soon as she's down to 2 hits from dying, stop. And after that it's all down to luck. Just gotta hope that you get the next 2 hits in and she dies, but there's a chance that by the time you start attacking she's already doing the tornado attacks and you lose time. But yeah, that is Warrior Within. I hope I made at least some sense of this game. It's a difficult run to explain and there's not a lot of time to explain everything. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this and maybe got something out of it.